Welcome back, everyone. This is the Soccer Talk Lads podcast. We are joining you on April 5th, which is a Wednesday, and it is the Wednesday of Holy Week, which doesn't get a special name. We got Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday, and Easter Sunday, but Wednesday is just left out in the
This
cold.
is the day for me in school where you're like looking ahead. You're like, okay, we got half day tomorrow. We're off on Friday. This day just drags on. As a
That's
as a
right.
guy who went to a bunch of Catholic schools.
I was going to say this is a very Catholic discussion we're having right now, but I agree. I mean, that's true. It's hard to deny. Yeah, so it's the middle of the week. We had a game on Saturday, a disappointing game. Also, we had the both nights of WrestleMania on Saturday and Sunday. So
Just a long
busy
weekend. Yeah.
crazy weekend. The I can't even speak today. My brain's fried. The home game against Minnesota. How do I speak? Justin, was our first defeat as a franchise, falling to Minnesota 1-0.
Steven, we're just all frazzled, honestly. It's
That's
like
right.
You lose one game and it all falls apart.
It's all over. Well, there are those out there that think that's going to happen. The St. Louis City SC lost 1-0 to Minnesota after outshooting them 16-0. Or 16-10, not outshooting them 16-0. That would be impossible.
It felt like it. It
3-1 shots on target, having 55% of the possession, better pass accuracy. All of the quick rundown stats look better for St. Louis City SC. So Justin, explain how this fell apart for St. Louis and how badly outplayed we were and what our concerns should be going forward.
Yeah, I mean, Steven, it's kind of like what we talked about last week, where it's like they're going to sit back, they're going to let us try to have the ball and come at them, and then you watch it actually transpire, and it's just incredibly frustrating. And this team looked like in the second half, they were getting, and like towards the end of the first half too, they were getting more and more frustrated. And I think that played right into Minnesota's game plan, really. And if you look at, we had all those shots and all those possessions in the first half, and we only generated 0.31 expected goals to Minnesota's 0.28. And then in the second half, we just kind of, I don't know if played into it is necessarily how we should say it, but I think from an execution standpoint, they were not as on top of their game in places that they should have been. I think a lot of that, it comes down to just Minnesota's game plan and taking them out of their favorable positions, really.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think it was just a situation where our game plan didn't quite measure up as well as it had in other games, and that's fine. It's going to happen. This was bound to happen. I was hoping we'd push through this and lose to Seattle. If
it would have been,
Seattle,
it would have felt much better losing on the road to Seattle than at home to Minnesota.
But Minnesota appears to be a good team. Look, they've got 13 points. They're doing quite well for themselves as well. So, I know there's some people spiraling out there who, think that this is proof that maybe we were overinflated. Maybe we're playing a bunch of bad teams in the first 5 games, and
there's half truths there. Yeah,
there's half truths, but here's the thing: if you can consistently curb stomp bad teams, you're a playoff team. So, I don't know what. Did anyone think we were Supporter Shield contenders before, for real? Maybe a few people, but I think we've shown that we're probably a team that can at least comfortably finish 5th, 6th, 7th, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
that's more than enough.
My outlook on this team,
points were just banked already.
Yeah, my outlook on this team has not changed. I look at it as, coming into this, Minnesota and St. Louis were the 28th and 29th ranked possession teams. So you come into that game knowing that St. Louis operates best when the other team can have the ball in their own half of the field and try to build out of the back, and they can pressure those center backs. And that's just not how Minnesota plays. So it was always going to be a formational mismatch and a style of play mismatch. So now it just makes that second return match so fun to think about, of how Bradley Carnell is going to make adjustments and change.
Yeah. So what adjustments do you think he would make in that scenario?
I think
dive deep into your Joe Lowry bag of tricks and break down the strategy for us.
Yeah.
I love
okay. it. Happily. I did write about it a little bit.
I'd love to hear about it. Tell us more. First of all, where did you write about it?
Oh, in Area Sports. So Area Sports Network, of course, is where I cover the day-to-day minutia. And then we talked to Bradley Carnell after the match, and that's where I think I get a lot of my like kind of understanding of what they're trying to do. But Carnell was talking about how the intensity dipped. And I think you see that when, like, especially in the second half, they were able to get the ball and have a lot more time on the ball than I think they wanted them to have.
Mhm.
And so here's like the full quote of, he said, the subs that you saw, we wanted to reboot the system with what we were seeing in the second half because our intensity just wasn't where we wanted them to be. So like it just, I think you just have those games, and Roman Berkey kind of talked about this after the game too. Just like it just felt like even, and Roman Berg said even he himself felt like the intensity just wasn't there. So I think it was just one of those games where like it's a long season, you just weren't up to that level that you should have been. Um, Let's said after the game, you were you're talking penalties and maybe penalties on time, and we can talk about this a little bit, Stephen, of the kind of make or break moments in this game. But so
Mhm.
those are tough calls that neither go your way, and I don't think you have to focus too much on that when there were many moments that you let them get into the game and put you in situations that you shouldn't have been in the first place. So that kind of just speaks to like they let Minnesota run their game plan and dictate the run of play, and which forced St. Louis to hold on to the ball and kind of be a little bit slower in their build up, slower in their attack than I think the coaches wanted to see.
Yeah, so let's talk about that critical moment then in the 70th minute, 70, let me get the official 78th minute, excuse me.
There we go.
The penalty awarded to Minnesota, taken and struck
Mm.
home by Luis Amarilla. Obviously was the deciding goal. What did you think about the penalty call? And what did you think about the penalty calls that didn't happen?
Yeah, I
For the
think I think that I call this a penalty. Like the margins are definitely thin, but uh Heber comes through after Nelson already shields Emery off the ball, and like if it ends there, it's a clean tackle, but he comes through him and catches him with his back foot, like behind the play at that point. So
Mm,
like in the box, that's always going to get called for a pen. So I don't feel hard done by that. I feel a little bit hard done by the Klaus call on the other side of the field, but like I think when you're talking at that point, it's like you're relying on referees that don't necessarily call the same thing every week to be
mhm.
consistent. And I don't know. Like I'm not upset with that penalty, and I'm not upset by the penalty not being given to Klaus, but it's just like
Yeah.
such fine margins to decide a game like this.
I think it's a situation, I think Bradley Carnell said it really well, where it's like you need to be in a situation where that doesn't decide the game.
Hmm.
I mean, there are times where you played a really fantastic game and a call is just wrong. I mean, there are
Yeah,
fewer of these times with VAR, but there have been times where a call is just wrong, or you feel really unjustly done by a call and it really determines the game. But this is not a game where we were dominant and deserved to win, or at least played very competitively and deserved a nil-nil draw
yeah.
or something, and have
You're
that taken
relying
away from
on
us,
the officiating to bail you out as opposed to
Yeah,
like, yeah. And
right,
you don't want to be relying on these officials to
right.
bail you out.
Everybody wants to complain about the referees, and you want to be the team that doesn't have to. Even if the referees are a problem,
Yeah.
you want to be a team that doesn't have to complain about it. And so I'm encouraged to see that they have taken that approach and aren't complaining about the
Yeah, and they
call.
did have like if they wanted to call out the officiating, they could because Jared Stroud had a yellow card that was rescinded after the
Uh,
game yesterday and given a yellow card to one of the Minnesota players for embellishment. So it's not like there wasn't cause for them to be upset about poor officiating. But yeah, it's I guess refreshing to see like the leadership group too, because Tim Parker, Berkey, Leuven all talked like not using it as an excuse. And I think that's from your leadership group, that's what you want to see of like not of they're clearly upset and like a little bit frustrated, but they were very much wanting to move on and not dwell on the refereeing and things.
yeah, that's good to see. Um, do you think there was anything obvious that this team could have done, maybe changes in the formation or changes in the lineup that could have countered could have how do I want to say this? Could have turned the tide of the game earlier than it did. Do you think there were any moments that stick out to you other than the penalty calls where you thought, oh, maybe a bad call was made here, maybe something wasn't done soon enough?
Like
Or
it
is it?
did. I don't know. Like I think it just like it's hard to really put your finger on it. Like we said, the margins are close, so like it changes a lot if their intensity is where it needs to be. And I don't know if that's necessarily something that you can fix with a formational change versus like just going into the game slightly different. But I did like, so towards the end of the game, Blom came in to play kind of at the base of the midfield. They moved Ludwin up higher into the field, so they made more of a midfield diamond versus the 4-2-3-1 that they had kind of into the game. And I think that seemed to have worked a little bit better, especially when Aziel Jackson comes on and like he's a player that takes on guys a little bit more than like outside of Ludwin that we have. So like I think that change, if done earlier, is a little more effective. But like I'm not convinced that that necessarily would have been the way to go. But I liked seeing those like slight tweaks. It was a fascinating game if you watched. They're like Carnell and Heath were, I don't know, there are wrinkles in both formations that were constantly changing that I enjoyed watching.
Yeah, I thought it was a fun game. I mean, it's characteristically not dynamic Minnesota action. I would say they're not celebrated for their exciting, high paced, high intensity football. But you know, they won the game. So what are you going to say? How are you going to complain? And I personally don't think that this is a situation worth panicking over. I mean, I think there's a good chance we're going to go get stomped in Seattle as well.
Yeah, that's where I'm like, these are the hardest 3 games that we'll have all season, like in terms of the stretch, like Minnesota, Seattle, Cincinnati, where like they could lose all 3 games and you're like, well, that's not really unexpected.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about Seattle and what you expect there and what you think might be coming down the pike, because that is going to be rough, I would say.
Yeah, Seattle are a bit of a buzzsaw. And they're not like, they're not infallible. Like the Galaxy are able to kind of take it to them at times last week. And there's a period where, and Greg Vanney had a great post game where he was trying to demonstrate what Nuhu was doing with his arms about a no call handball that he felt should have been called. If you haven't watched him pantomime what is a handball, what isn't yet, you definitely should go out your way and find that. But so that's a big argument that Galaxy were able to kind of get into that game. But Seattle, like Jordan Morris has 4 goals in his past 2 games, or 5 goals in his past 2 games, 4 goals against Kansas City a couple weeks ago. And he's just a guy that's just like at the top of his game right now. And he's speedy against our back line that sometimes has some speed issues, although Tim Parker was running as fast as I've ever seen him run this past week. So hopefully he's recovered from that. Steven, do you notice how Tim Parker runs? I just want to ask you before we move on. Is there anything odd in his run that you've noticed?
I have not noticed it, but I would believe that there is. I would say that I would never slander Tim Parker under any circumstances.
All right,
so.
I'm not going to go into
No,
it.
go ahead. You have to now.
When he gets going, he like bobs his head back and forth, and it's very fun to watch. Yeah, when he's like,
gonna have to keep him in.
Now you're never going to not notice it, but if you ever watch him try to pick up steam, it's pretty good. It's like you know, it's like a train getting going.
When gingers try to do things that are athletic, there's always going to be some strange happenings, so.
You got to do something to counteract the ginger.
Much respect to the ginger community listening to this podcast. You're not welcome here. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I do have ginger blood in me, so we got to be careful with that, I guess.
Okay. All right. Wow. So you're a half blood. Good to know. No, everyone's welcome on the Soccer Talk Lads podcast, of course.
Especially gingers.
Except for Cincinnati fans.
Exactly.
What else do you want to talk about St. Louis City SC and looking at to?
So getting back to the Sounders, since I got us way off track, there is a period, like a space within their formation that is susceptible. So if you watch the game against the Galaxy, if you watch their game against Cincinnati, a lot of those chances come from the space like in the middle of the field, in front of the center backs, and like behind their defensive mid. So they usually play with a 4-2-3-1, just like I'm sure you used to if you watch City games. But it's a little bit different in that they're a little bit slower in how they build up, and they're not as high of a pressing team, but they're very dynamic. They're very strong in possession. They got players all over the field, but they have been vulnerable in that area. And St. Louis is actually very good in that area, and especially at those kind of like medium length balls and those diagonal balls getting into the box. So I think there are chances against Seattle, and especially they've had some issues playing out the back too that St. Louis can take advantage of, as we've seen outside of the Minnesota game. So
what I'm hearing is you're guaranteeing a victory in Seattle.
stone cold lock.
Okay. All right. Well, you heard it here, folks. This is good. This is very exciting.
Totally not nervous. Totally think they're going to win. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to the game. I think it'll be fun to watch a game of my team play in Seattle in the legendary Seattle atmosphere. Never gotten to do that. Watch some other games. Always fun to watch Seattle Sounders games.
It's also nice that they got that Portland game out of the way, because like in Portland it seemed like especially Ludwin wasn't used to playing on turf yet, so now they've got that experience out of the way.
Yeah, and I think speaking to the broader topic of just where we're at, if you look at this stretch, if you assume a loss against Seattle, which I'm not saying we should, but just for the sake of argument, even if you assume a loss against Cincinnati, I think if you go back to the start of the season and offer anyone 5-3-0 after 8 games, you're going to take that. So
yeah. A cool little nugget I picked up. So Lutz talked
about a good nugget.
So yeah, Lutz Pfannstiel, man of the people, talked to the media after the game, which is just great that he just like wants to put himself in front of people all the time. He said that they look at the season in 6-game increments, so I thought was interesting. So like it makes it a little bit more manageable if you look at this in like a 6-game increment. So okay, we're starting our second block, let's say, and let me pull up the schedule here real quick. But if you say those first 2 games are tough, you're at Seattle, Cincinnati at home, but then you have Colorado, Portland, who we have beat already at home. That Dallas game will be tough, but then you have Chicago, which should be a very much winnable game. So like after this little run, then it becomes like much more manageable again if you look at it at like a 6-game block, 6-game increment, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I like that. Of course, that's a great way to explain away losing the last game of 6 games, but that's also,
Yeah, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't just invent that on the day.
Lutz is like, he strikes me as like what would happen if a Carney took over a soccer team. Like I love him and I love our team and I love the energy, but he's just got a wild vibe about it.
Yeah, if it's like,
did we lose our 6th game? Well, it doesn't matter. We think about the season in 6-game increments, Yeah,
it's like you don't trust anything a wrestler says.
That's right.
Has that same vibe. Yeah,
it's the exact same. All right, so that is St. Louis City. This we didn't mention this at the top. Probably going to be a shorter podcast. It's less fun to talk for a while when the team loses.
Ian's off in Japan hunting down the One Piece, so he's not here to give his advice either.
I forgot to even mention that bum isn't here. But yeah, so what else is going on in the world of soccer? Liverpool and Chelsea played a truly miserable game of soccer yesterday that we don't need to talk about beyond that at all. Justin, why don't you talk to me a little bit before we move internationally about Lionel Messi and the prospects of him coming to MLS? A lot of people are talking about this and many of them aren't happy, and that's interesting to me. So why don't you talk about it a bit?
Yeah, so to get into kind of where Messi stands at this point before we get into some of the rumors, it seems like it's down to 3 clubs, Inter Miami, Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia, that's reportedly offered him like a $400 million per year contract. Who knows if that is true or not, but and Barcelona, who somehow have money, I guess. I don't know how that works, because I could see him going back to Barcelona because obviously there's a lot of history there and Barcelona love him, but they had to unregister Gavi because of financial fair play, and I don't know how they're in so much financial fair play dirt right now that they can't register new players, and then you're gonna somehow offer Lionel Messi a contract that gets him to stay in Europe. I don't know how that works, but anyway, those are kind of the 3 teams rumored to be of interest to Lionel Messi. Inter Miami reporters are saying that it's done. European reporters are saying that he's going to Al Hilal. Some are saying that he's going to Barcelona. So no one really knows. But then the rumor was that MLS owners would be okay paying some of Lionel Messi's salary, which I think is a complete rumor because the article that it originated from was basically implying that MLS owners would want to make roster guideline moves. So they'd be willing to like give a fourth DP slot to teams or, some sort of creative roster accounting. And not necessarily that they would take on salary. I think it was someone not understanding how MLS salary structure works that was reporting that. But anyway, so then there is some hubbub around, do you want your team paying Lionel Messi's salary? That's kind of where we're at.
I would say yes. I guess this is maybe where I'm not a serious enough soccer fan or something.
Unserious podcast.
But like Lionel Messi is Lionel Messi. I don't know if people are familiar with this guy. He's pretty friggin' good at soccer, and he's a huge global superstar. And we're a league that is still growing and still maturing and still trying to make a reputation for itself. And yes, we can point to all the retirement league jokes and all that stuff, but if paying Lionel Messi for a couple years helps us just have a much bigger scale league in several years from now, I think it's worth. I mean, can anyone argue that the David Beckham decision wasn't worth
I would also push back on this idea that like MLS owners can't afford his salary. Like, who's the owner of Inter Miami? It's Jose Mas is like a billionaire. So you're telling me that like Jose Mas can't afford Lionel Messi's salary? Like they're going to offer him like club equity, large salary. Like the question is, does he want to come to MLS? That's what I see as the like hindering factor. Like Lionel Messi, for all the retirement league jokes, like Lionel Messi may be old, but he's still, him and Angel Di Maria basically won Argentina's World Cup for them. So like he is still a world-class player, the best player of all time, still at a high level. Like
controversy, folks, but
not really.
Yeah.
I think it's funny. So the rumors of him falling out with PSG are over sporting differences, and I just like the idea of him leaving PSG to go to like the Saudi Arabian league over sporting differences. Very funny.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I think if it's the Saudi league versus MLS, I think he'd probably prefer MLS, but it's, I mean, that's just me guesstimating. I don't know. There's a lot of money in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. I also have never been offered a $400 million premium contract. So.
But it's just, as far as whether it's worth it, I mean, I just think it's hard to argue that it's not worth it.
I think for Messi, my pitch for Messi would be, if you go to Miami, you're in a very vibrant Latino, especially being Messi community, and like that's going to help his brand out so much. I mean, the guy already vacations in Miami, so why not go there to play soccer?
Yeah, agreed. All right, anything else MLS?
No. I still believe that St. Louis City is the best team in the world, so I'm glad that we can talk about that.
I agree. We're the best on earth. Any other international or soccer or football news?
Steven, why are you stalling? Why are you stalling this conversation?
I'm not stalling. What conversation do you want to have?
I want to talk about Chelsea and Liverpool yesterday. They played.
We don't need to talk about that game. It was terrible.
A 0-0 draw, one where Liverpool had 0.35 expected goals to Chelsea's 2.17. A game so bad, Steven, that they hired Frank Lampard today to coach Chelsea again.
Pretty friggin' depressing, if you ask me. I had a bad Saturday. All my teams I got into bed with lost. I had a team. Obviously, Liverpool got murked by Manchester City. And I jumped into bed with my friend, the Dortmund fan, my friend slash boss from Germany. So
Stephen, as a longtime Dortmund supporter,
I bought
I don't know why you would do that to yourself.
I actually like Dortmund already, but I bought a hat, so now I'm official. And then they got murked as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely shambolic first goal, by the way, just ridiculous, terrible goalkeeping.
What you have to
Hilarious.
know about Dortmund is that they've never seen a title chase that they couldn't screw away in some way.
That's right. It seems to be the case. And then, of course, City on Saturday night. So, and then of course Cody Rhodes on Sunday night. Too soon.
Just a
Too soon.
shambolic decision.
But,
if you
yeah,
ask
that's
me.
right. Exactly. Gotta love the word shambolic. But the game yesterday, I mean, what do you want to say about it? It sucked. These teams both suck right now. They're terrible. Jurgen Klopp is basically openly saying, like, my job should be in question.
I like how
He's
Jurgen
made a couple
Klopp's
of
in
comments
this.
like, the only reason I'm not fired is because of what we've done in the past. This is terrible, you know?
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up with you because he's in his like no fucks era. I
Yeah.
feel like, and like everyone's asking him about other things that are happening in the Premier League, and he's giving like candid answers that I feel like is very much like acknowledging that Liverpool aren't in the
honestly.
in
Yeah.
the title race anymore.
I mean, Jurgen Klopp, on top of being one of the best managers, probably the best manager in the world, at least at his peak, is also just a very genuine and honest and interesting person, and funny, like genuinely funny. So it's always, you know, I always enjoy hearing him wax on about pretty much anything. But yeah, I mean, it's clear that Liverpool just don't have the horses right now, more than anything. They couldn't send, on top of everything else, they were hoping they'd get Luis Diaz back for the game this weekend. They didn't. He still needs more time. They were hoping Virgil van Dijk. Well, I mean, of course they were hoping, but he missed on illness. So, like, on top of whatever else, they missed several key players in addition to the players they were already missing. Their midfield is honestly embarrassing for a team that thought that they were a top 4 club this year. Like, I love Jordan Henderson, I love James Milner. He's not even really part of the equation, but like Fabinho has fallen off entirely. Alcantara can't do, Thiago can't do much with the players that there are. We had the kid whose name is escaping me. He looked really good, Basetic, for a while. And then of course he went down for the season with injury. So I think it's just a matter of Fenway needs to spend hundreds of millions of dollars this summer on a midfield, or needs to adjust to Liverpool not being a top 4 team.
Hundreds of millions of dollars on a Jude Bellingham, perhaps.
Well, perhaps, but here's the thing: Jude Bellingham alone isn't enough. Like, they have to get multiple midfielders, and that's what really scares me. Even if they know that they can win the Jude Bellingham race, they still have to spend more money on other pieces.
Do you think that if they spend like 150 million on Jude Bellingham, how confident are you that they would also go somewhere else?
I mean, they obviously really, really want Jude Bellingham. There's no way that they can spend on par with City or Real Madrid or anyone of the other top clubs, Newcastle for that matter, to get him. So it really relies on Jude just saying, I want to go to Anfield. Now, there's a pretty good chance that he's going to do that. So I'm not that worried about that. But like, if they get him, on the one hand, you can say we spent 150 million on Jude Bellingham. How can we afford anyone else? But I almost don't understand how you could justify not spending 30 million on somebody else. If you
have to make up 30 points on the table this offseason.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think if they've got a healthy attack, and you know, if they've got a healthy front 3 for the full season, Darwin has looked better and better. I think if he's, you know, settled and good from the start of the season, you've got Gakpo and Diaz and Salah. Obviously, your defense is a little questionable at this point, but you know, I think it's worth considering moving Trent to midfield and looking at other options at right back. But then again, if you have a better midfield and he's not as exposed, maybe he doesn't look as bad at right back. So that's a different question entirely. But yeah, I mean, it's really, you know, it's as simple as they got to spend money. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for them, because as much as the oil tycoons and everything makes this a lot harder, they have just badly mismanaged talent over the past. I mean, everyone who's left Liverpool has left for free. Every single person.
Not
You've
getting
got
a fee for Sadio Mane is outrageous to me.
insane. That one's insane. But like Bobby Firmino is going to leave for free. Naby Keita, who never worked, not for 1 second. There was never, I like him. I don't hold anything against him, but from the very start of his Liverpool tenure, from the very moment he signed on, it was like, oh, don't know about this one. And it never got better. It never got better than don't know for sure. And they're not going to sell him. Chamberlain's going to leave for free. Emre Chan left for free. I think that's going back a ways. I'm trying to remember who left for free last summer. Obviously, Mane. There was another big name in the midfield that I can't even think of right now. Oh, Wijnaldum, Jorginho Wijnaldum left for free. Who, by the way, they would be very happy to have right now, but they let him leave for free. So like they claim to want to be a money in, money out club, and then they let all these guys walk for free. Like, I just don't know how you justify that.
Yeah, like especially if you're not hitting on guys coming in for free.
Yeah,
also,
and
yeah,
that's right. And they haven't much. I mean, Thiago was very either free or very dirt cheap, but he hasn't been. He's been good. I think he's shined at times, but he really needs the full system to be working around him, and unfortunately, it hasn't for a lot of times recently. So, I hope they get their crap together and get their heads out of their butts a little bit. But it's definitely tenuous times, and I think it's up to them whether they want to be a top 4 club and be consistently competing for Champions League spots and titles, or if they're going to spend in the mid-range and probably lose Jurgen Klopp and probably go down to that, 12th to 6th kind of range that is the destiny of teams that aren't willing to spend like the big clubs anymore.
The new Everton.
That's
are we ready to accept Arsenal supremacy yet?
And
how depressing is that?
I'm never ready to accept Arsenal supremacy. Let's be very clear on that. What's the current gap right now? They're up 8 points. Yeah, I think.
And City are fully on Champions League duty at this point. So
yeah, I think
I don't see them.
I think they've got it pretty wrapped up, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't love it. I don't love it. I was looking up Liverpool players that have left for free. This is from 2018 to today. Emre Can, Daniel Sturridge.
Oh, that's a name.
That's a name. That's a name from the past. Adam Lallana, Jorginho Wijnaldum, Divock Origi, Loris Karius. I don't think Mane did leave for free. I don't think it was a huge fee. Let me see what fee.
33 million. So you're right. I was wrong. He did not leave for free.
But but it's Sadio Mane.
That is still cheap for Sadio Mane.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, those are, again, there's 2022, last summer, 6 players left for free. Now, I haven't heard of 2 of those players, and one of the ones that I have heard of is, very young Ben Woodburn. So it's not like you were going to get a ton for a lot of those guys, but might have gotten something, and they haven't, and that's pretty unimportant. Or pretty unimportant. I'm sorry, I was reading the page. Pretty disappointing is what I was trying to say.
Pretty unLaporte.
Yes, that's right.
No, it's a very interesting conversation, because if you look at, like, to throw Red Bull out there, if you look at like RB Leipzig, it's not like they spend a ton of money, but they're able to like compete up the table because they do a good job of bringing in young players that they can either bring up to Leipzig or flip somewhere else. And like, you feel like for Liverpool, if they aren't going to be spending their own money, they should at least be in the market of like finding these young players, like Minamino, for instance, of like these young players that you bring in and then like try to either flip them for more money elsewhere or like better implement them into your team instead of just like letting them walk if they don't work.
Yeah, absolutely. And they haven't brought in a player for free since 2019. I've never heard either of the players they brought in then. the last player that they brought in for free that I know of is Joel Matip in 2016. Before that, it was James Milner and Danny Ings. So, some players that have worked out pretty well for the team. You would think they'd explore that option a little more. I realize it's not usually easy to get players to come in for free, but it just, the first opening years of Klopp were so clinical in how he acquired the right people all the time, but paid up for the people that deserve to be paid up for, which I think is going to be true with Jude Bellingham too. If fingers crossed that they can get him, I think he's a player that I don't know if anyone's worth $150 million, but as much as one could be, he's the kind of player that can define your franchise for a decade, so like that's pretty significant. But they haven't made the money going out the way they should. They've made a lot of money winning championships and being in Champions League and things like that. And now they have to just decide if they're going to spend or if they're going to get bought out by Qatar, or if they're not going to spend and be increasingly irrelevant. And I think that's where we're at,
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about like when you're there for so long, like Klopp's, not to say Klopp's been there forever, but a long time for a world-class manager anyway. And like you get attached to certain players instead of moving on players when you should. Like I feel like that's why Man City has been so successful, is that Pep is kind of cold in terms of like moving players on when the time is right.
Right. And I think that's true too. I mean, I think it's really easy to say, well, how am I going to sell, like last summer? How do we sell out Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain? We might need him this year. Well, you sell him because you need to get other people.
Yeah. And then you have a succession plan in place to replace them. Yeah.
Yeah. And they haven't done, they got a couple of guys early on, Andy Robertson being the best example, but Mo Salah being another pretty much example of this, where they paid, dirt cheap really for them and just found the perfect fit and found somebody that grew into, in both of those cases, a legitimate superstar, top player at their position kind of player. They haven't done that as well either. So little suspect on the scouting and acquisition department lately. Nunez, I think is going to work out. I know there's a lot of scuttlebutt about him as well, but
he'll be good. It's like everyone overreacts to this.
I mean, he's physically dominant. He's looked a lot better, I think, recently. So, I'm not too concerned about him.
You just need time. Like you need to, I don't know. English media is terrible. They need to give people more time to actually adjust to places.
100%. So that's my long-winded rant on Liverpool. I hope I didn't take too much of our time here, but that's where I'm at. Frustrated, but not overly surprised, and hopeful that the future is brighter than today.
Don't we all?
Yeah. Any final international questions?
Outside of congratulations to Real Madrid on their Champions League title. Outside of that, I think the Champions League is interesting too, Stephen, because so you have one side of the bracket, which is Madrid versus Chelsea, Manchester City versus Bayern Munich, and then the other side is Milan, Napoli, and Benfica and Inter Milan. I think one side of that bracket is much stronger than the other, and I still think Real Madrid just walks their way to the title, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's probably true. Before we sign off, Justin, I know that you are a man who has written many things. And you
many things, many places.
Exactly. I was getting there. And I know that you wrote a piece for STL Mag this week about Azeel Jackson, or how do you pronounce it, Justin?
So Azeel Jackson, but he goes by AZ. Also like AZ, as our Canadian friends would say.
Well, this is a player that we picked off of Minnesota United's second team after he was player of that league last year, right? So
if you listen to our West Burdine episode last week, we talked about Azeel quite a bit actually, because I wanted to get his opinion on it, and he played 19 minutes this weekend. He played the second half of the City 2 game also, but just I wrote a piece for STL Mag just talking about like how this team sees him, because he hasn't been able to stick anywhere yet, and he's 21 years old. He's very talented. Like he's the type of player that you watch him play and like jumps off the page at you immediately. So just kind of exploring like why he hasn't stuck yet and how he's kind of getting the chance here to write his story, so to speak. Hopefully, finish it better than Cody Rhodes to tie it all back, Steven.
Wrestling went from like the biggest joy in my life on.
Can we? So
Saturday.
Before we wrap up here, I watched WrestleMania this weekend. Obviously, I don't watch much WWE these days just because of how much of a drag it is to watch. Sometimes I'll watch the highlights. And night one, I thought was actually good. So I was like, okay, maybe they turned a corner.
I thought both nights were sensational until the decision that they made at the end of night two.
Just Cody losing just completely ruined it for me. And then I also made the mistake of watching Raw last night, and that was terrible.
And then so for those who don't know, if you want soccer talk, if you're an only soccer person, you can tune out now. But we apparently are a part wrestling network now. So
I just needed to get this off my chest.
WrestleMania is obviously the biggest.
Much like Vince McMahon's mustache, I am in your face whether you want it or not.
That's right. WrestleMania is the biggest event on the WWE calendar. Recently, they've decided to split it into 2 nights of events. So it's Saturday and a Sunday, which before it was just all on Sunday, but they were turning out to be 5 or 6 or 7 hour shows. So they changed that. Great decision. I was never sure on that decision. And then last year it turned out to be great. And this year it's great. The show was sensational, but then on Sunday afternoon, the news broke that it sounded like Endeavor, the owner of UFC, was going to purchase the majority stake in WWE away from Vince McMahon, or at least purchase it in part away from Vince McMahon, take controlling stake, and take over the company, turn UFC and WWE. I've seen a lot of people say into one company. It's not in the sense that like they're actually merged, because that would be gibberish and nonsense, but in the sense that Disney and ESPN are one company. They're under one umbrella. That was, interesting, not confirmed on Sunday, but that kind of shadow hung over everything. Then in the main event of WrestleMania, they decided to choose not to have the upstart, new, young, exciting, good guy win the title, which young, I always knew was a decision that could be made, but he's 37, but they made it, and that seemed wrong. And then Monday, Raw, their flagship show, was terrible. And then all the news broke that Vince McMahon was back in charge of it. Vince, the former owner of WWE, the founder, well, not the founder, but the man who grew it from a $1 million regional company into a global powerhouse, about 8 months ago.
The family business.
That's
family
right.
business.
About 8 months ago, there were lots of allegations that surfaced about him, and he stepped away, retired, quote unquote. Obviously not against his will, now that we know the full picture and see what he's done now. Triple H, his son-in-law, took over and did, I would say, a sensational job, a far better job than he's done over the last decade or so, and grew it to having the most successful WrestleMania of all time. So, of course, Endeavor thought, instead of keeping with that, let's put this 77-year-old man back in charge, because that makes sense. So
77-year-old man who desperately wants you to send him pictures of Spider-Man.
That's right. Basically, I went from about the happiest I've ever been as a wrestling fan on Saturday night, especially with the ending to night one. That match was sensational, phenomenal. And then, sometime most of Monday night was bad, but then Tuesday afternoon, when it was confirmed that it was bad because Vince was back in charge, then I'm now as about as depressed as I've ever been as a wrestling fan. So that's that story. It's the thing about wrestling that people don't get. People that don't get wrestling, I get that. Totally understand why you don't. But the thing that people don't understand is the backstage nonsense is just as drama.
These are, and I can't stress this enough, a bunch of carnies that are unreliable in every sense of
everyone is a carny, and it's wild. So anyway, that's the WrestleMania rundown, and now I'm sad again. So
that was a good rundown, Steven.
Thank you.
Good explainer.
Yes. I'm sure if you watch, well, maybe it'll be like 6 weeks old by the time Ian's back from Japan hunting for the last remnants of nuclear fallout.
I think it takes about 20 years to find the One Piece, so yeah, he might be over there for a while.
Yeah. Ian is a big manga fan, big anime fan, and he's doing things that we dare not even speak of. But, no, Ian is actually on a honeymoon 1 year after. Apparently, people
Ooh.
just take their honeymoons whenever they want now. So 1 year after his marriage, he's now on a honeymoon, and we wish him just the best. But that's it. Justin, you have anything else? Do you have anything you'd like to talk about?
No, we've touched everything that was on my mind and more even.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, in that case, it's been great catching up with you. It's great talking soccer. We will be back after St. Louis City defeats the Seattle Sounders
That's
this
right.
weekend, or doesn't. Either way, we'll be here and we will talk to you all real soon. Have a wonderful week. Happy Easter, happy Passover if you celebrate. Be blessed, don't be stressed, and have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.
Adios.